counselor here at the Career Center. This alumni chat series was designed so that students can get just an insight into someone's career path and experience and hear advice. So Randy, thanks for being with us today. We're just going to take a little bit over this next hour and hear about maybe what you're doing now, what your experience was when you were at Cal, your career path journey, and then, of course, it's always great to just kind of get your insight and advice. I know you are a recent grad and just kind of went through this whole experience during the pandemic. So yeah, I'll just turn it over to you. And if you could tell us a little bit about maybe, your major at Cal, what your Cal experience was like, how you came to decide on what to pursue first next upon graduation, what that job search process was like, and would love to hear not only about what you do, but I think what's really interesting about your situation is that you are working as an independent contractor. And that is often a mystery to students as well. Like, how do you go about finding work in that way and negotiating that? So I'll just turn it over to you to tell us a little bit about yourself. And then, I might have some follow-up questions from that. So thanks, take it away.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited. So, like you said, I graduated last year in May 2020, and I was a media studies major. And so during my time at Cal, I absolutely loved it. I still miss Cal almost a year later. I can't believe it. Um, but yeah, so while I was at Cal, I did a few different things. I was a research apprentice at the Center for Race and Gender, and I did that through URAP, which if students aren't familiar with that program, I would highly recommend looking into it. It's such a great way to learn, work with professors and grad students, and do research. And it was just one of my absolute favorite things I got to do while I was at Cal. I also did the global internship program. So in summer of 2019, I went to Prague, Czech Republic, and I was an editorial intern at the Prague Visitor, which is a magazine publication that was released monthly. It's all in English, so it's designed for tourists coming through Prague, and it's kind of a guide. So it tells, places to eat, the events that are taking place for that month, where to travel outside of Prague. And so I worked there for the summer of 2019. And then my senior year, I did an honors thesis. So my thesis was looking at gendered communication in film, specifically analyzing women saying I'm sorry when it's not necessary. So I was super passionate about that project, and that was an amazing experience doing a thesis, writing a thesis. And yeah, so that was my time at Cal. And, last year I was attending these events as well as a student. And I remember the shift of going from in person and going to the networking events and job fairs. And then suddenly, overnight, our lives all changed. Um, so that was definitely a transition. I remember in February being told at an event by an HR recruiter that, the job market was the best it's been. I was graduating in a booming economy. I would just have my pick. And then a month later, um, it just all changed. So navigating that was a lot of emotions, and it definitely disappointing and scary and hard. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. But I utilize my resources at Career Center. I utilize doing informational interviews and networking online, and that's how I ended up landing the position I'm at now. So definitely tapping into LinkedIn and really reaching out to the people to see if there's any kind of network or connection that can be made is really helpful, especially in this time. And since so many people are at home, I found that people are really willing and they have more time to kind of hop on a call. And so really using that very much benefited me and got me to where I am now with my job.
Perfect. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, I really want to hear kind of what a day in your life is like and what you're doing. But I'm also curious to hear how it came to be that you were hired as an independent contractor. Is that something that the company put out there? Did you approach it in that way? So kind of both pieces, a day in your life, and then also kind of this, kind of different way of being hired.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a project coordinator at Right One Media Group. So we are a media and communication company. And so the way that job came about is over the summer, I was applying to a lot of jobs. And I was also reaching out to people for informational interviews, which I highly recommend students doing, even if you're not entering the job market in the next few months. Um, it's a really good tool for you to learn about different industries, learn about the job you're interested in, and then just build that connection with someone that's in the workforce. So I was on LinkedIn, and my now boss, I saw her profile, and the work she was doing was really interesting to me, and I was really inspired just by her. And so I thought, it's probably a long shot, but I'm going to reach out and see if I can do an informational interview just to pick her brain and just learn really about her company, how she got to where she is. um, and so I did. I connected with her, and she wanted to set up an informational interview, and so we did. um, and I definitely recommend, if you're not familiar with informational interviews, there's a great video on YouTube. I can link it in the chat, that kind of gives the do's and don'ts of how to approach it. Um, and so on that call, I really just got to learn about her. I came with questions, and then she asked about me and my experience. And eventually that led to asking for me to send my resume, which led to a job offer as an independent contractor. So in my situation, the company was the one that presented being an independent contractor. Um, and as far as a day in my life, working for a media company, my job really does change day to day, week to week, which I love. There are certain tasks and responsibilities that are constant every week. Um, but I also get to do a lot of different things. So, like this past weekend, we had a client had an event, and I got to help organize, um, market, put that event on. Um, and so there's just often different things coming down the pipeline. A lot of my job entails project coordinating, facilitation, and then just making sure the project life cycle is running on time, working with other team members for all of their deliverables to make sure that we're completing our tasks. Um, I do a lot of like brand development, strategic communication for clients, some business development as well. So yeah, every day is a little different. Depending on my meetings, I may start the day in meetings, um, and then I kind of do my work around my schedule. So that's one thing that's really great about being an independent contractor is you do have that control and flexibility with your schedule, which is very much a perk. So if I need to say go to the dentist, I have that flexibility to block that time out and go make that appointment. Um, if I need to start earlier, I can do that. If I need to work a little later, I can, as long as I'm meeting my deadlines on time. There really is that flexibility, which is a really great component to being an independent contractor. So, like I said, my days are always a bit different, but I, try to start them around the same time, and then just, make sure I'm meeting all my tasks and deadlines.
So you talked a little bit about flexibility. Are you able, and I know that this is that you've just graduated and you're just out there, so you might not be able to say a lot about this yet. But I'm just curious. In addition, like, do you know why is it common in media? Why would an organization prefer to like as a hire an independent contractor versus like um, just like a full-time kind of traditional position? And you mentioned flexibility, but are there other ways in which you like working as an independent contractor might be different or does it kind of feel very similar?
Different as opposed to.
Like the way we think of like being hired more traditionally, just like you're on staff, you're in,
Mhm,
flexibility, it sounds like is one. Are there
mhm.
other differences that you've experienced?
Yeah, so flexibility is definitely, I would say, one of the biggest components that's different for sure, but there's a lot of similarities. I work with a team. Obviously, that was an adjustment being remote, which my company, even if, whenever the pandemic ends, I would still stay remote, but I still work with a team of people. So it's not in office. So that in the beginning was an adjustment for me, just compared to other jobs I've had, being able to work with other people and seeing them face to face every day. Um, but I mean, all of our work right now is remote. So, and a lot of companies are saying that they may stay remote or give the option to let people choose if they want to do remote or come in. So that, like I said, was an adjustment for me. But that would have been for anyone, whether you're independent contractor or not. Um, Another key difference, I'm trying to think, the flexibility, and definitely I would say just as an independent contractor, your compensation is going to look different. So you will not have doing independent contract work, healthcare through that company. You will file taxes on your own as a self-employed individual. So you'll be doing a 1099. Um, so you definitely want to be setting money aside each paycheck to make sure that you don't have a high tax payment whenever you file. So those are just things to be mindful of as well as you enter. Um, but you also have the opportunity to do other work outside. And if you have a side hustle or other things you're interested in, you really do have that flexibility to plan your days out how you need, and you don't have to necessarily get approval like you would at a typical like employed 9 to 5 job. And so that's definitely a benefit that you really can, if you're someone that, say you're a web developer, you can work on multitude of projects with different companies, and you really can figure out your schedule and the work you take on, what you maybe don't have time to take on. So there's a lot of control in that regard with an independent contractor.
So just one more question before we just kind of move on and talk more about about just what kind of the actual work. Um, how have you figured out this process of navigating as an independent contractor? I know you're just in the process of figuring it out. Are there how have you gotten support? Are there resources or things you've used to kind of navigate this?
Yeah, so I before I went to Cal, I was a hairstylist, so this isn't my first time navigating a 1099. There are definitely differences in the hairstyling industry and in the media industry, but a lot of it has just been learning as I go. Whenever this opportunity came about, like I said, I had an understanding of what being an independent contractor meant and entailed, but I also, was new to this industry, and so there was a learning curve just as far as like what I was doing on a day-to-day basis with my tasks, but then as well just how that being an independent contractor looked in this field. I'm very fortunate. I have an incredible boss and mentor, and anytime I have a question, um, I ask, and she always is really helpful in sharing and letting me know. And then I've done, just research online to gain more understanding and clarity. Um, but because my boss is someone that I know I can go to, I always use. If I have a question, I know I can go to her, and she'll walk me through it.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Kind of going back to just kind of your actual work and definitely transition from Cal. What do you feel were the most valuable transferable skills that you learned in college that you use today in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely time management skills. Being at Cal, especially when it's midterms, finals, you have a lot of deadlines, a lot of pressure. And so I think learning how to handle that stress and pressure and then also meet those deadlines on time very much prepares you for the workforce. Another area, problem solving, critical analysis, because you're doing that every day at Cal, and then just developing research skills and being resourceful on your own. Um, I definitely learned that at Cal. And so, I have done a lot of research on my own and figured things out in my job. And that, initially that skill set started at Cal. The second thing, or the third thing, I guess I should say, would be interpersonal communication skills. Studying communication definitely helped me. And then I also did public speaking. I was on the speech and debate team um, during my time in school. And so that always helps. I would definitely recommend students, if they've not taken a public speaking class, to do that, because I know now it's a little different, obviously, than being in person, but you're going to be doing presentations potentially in your line of work or leading a team call or a meeting. And so just having that background and experiences was really helpful and still benefits me, every day in my job.
So, building on that, any other advice you might give to a student that wanted to get into your line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. So advice I would say is, take as many classes as you can. Right now, LinkedIn is offering free classes. General Assembly often offers free courses. So anything that you're seeing regarding or relating to media, social media management, branding, marketing, if you can take that class, do that, because I've sat in some of the free classes and they're really helpful. And it's also another way to network and meet people. So I've taken classes and then after connected with the person who led the class as a thank you. And, that was a connection. And so, and then also when you're in the class, people will send through their LinkedIn or their information to connect. And so it's a really good tool. And there are some classes I've taken that you have to pay for. I know on a student budget that's harder, but right now we are still seeing a lot of free classes. So I definitely recommend that. And then if there's any media company, do your research and follow them on their social media platforms. Follow, because a lot of media companies will, release trends that are taking place or talk about different things happening in media. And so it's a really good way to be engaged in that world. And it doesn't require a lot of extra time or work, but you're still seeing it on a daily basis.
Yeah, great. And so you actually touched on something I wanted to ask about. What kind of trends are you noticing within your line of work that maybe new hires should be aware of or pay attention to?
Yeah, so I can speak to like trends I'm seeing just in media and then specifically in the job market. I would say the biggest thing is I know I've said this throughout, but really tapping into the social media platforms such as LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think I read over the weekend, has 760 million users. So you really have access to a lot of people, and Berkeley alums are a great place to start. In my experience, they're always very excited and very open and wanting to help you and connect with you. So definitely, if there's a company you're looking at, go to that company, see if there's Berkeley alum. If so, see if you can schedule a type of informational interview to get to connect with them and learn. So that's definitely advice I would have. We are seeing an influx in recruiting happening online, um, just because we don't have the typical opportunities to network. So really just being engaged in that, I would say, is the biggest advice I have, and not being afraid to reach out. Like I said, I found people really do want to help, and people, they understand and empathize with what's happening in our world. And so a lot of people, they want to help students and they want to see you succeed in this environment. And so that would be my first suggestion is like, don't be afraid, um, because people really do want to help.
I know we talked about transferable skills and we talked about, advice you'd give students who wanted to get into this line of work. Maybe just to ask again more specifically, are there certain experiences, like certain kinds of internships or any kind of specific experiences you'd really recommend students look for and seek out in order to be a more competitive applicant?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, if you're wanting, depending on what field you're going into, absolutely. But if you can attain quantitative skills that you can put on an application or on a resume, that definitely is going to benefit you. Qualitative skills will help as well, but really having the data driven, a lot of companies are looking for that. And I know for myself, when I was entering, I had more qualitative to put on my resume, but not a lot of actual numbers. And so if you can do anything regarding if you're wanting to go in media, if you're managing, say, a social media account, and you can put like, how did you drive organic traffic? How did you increase engagement? Those types of details, that's going to really help you. And then as far as internships go, I would be, I think any internship you're going to learn and grow, even if you realize that's not what you want to do down the line. Um, but if you're wanting to go into media, I would highly recommend if you can get a marketing internship, just because so much is going to digital marketing, e-commerce. So it's only going to benefit you to have that experience. So if you can get in to a marketing internship, that would be really helpful. Um, and yeah, I would just say gain as much experience as possible. And I know that can be really hard, but even if that's, offering your time at, say, like a startup company. So AngelList is a great resource, and going and looking and seeing, is there a startup where I can really get hands-on experience that's going to be able to transfer when I'm putting it on my application and going into the workforce.
Okay, so what would you say is one common myth within your line of work, and maybe why? This is your opportunity to like dispel a myth. So, what's a common myth within your line of work, and why have you found it not to be true?
Yeah, so I guess a common myth I had going in to media was I kind of only saw media company as focused on social media, and I kind of had the perception that I needed to have built a social media platform that had a large following, engagement, and all of those things. And I realized that that's not true at all. And so the biggest thing is just understanding that you do have transferable skills. And even if you yourself are wanting to go into even social media work, and that's because there are some media companies that only specify in content creation and branding for their clients. And so just know that all of those things are skills you can learn. If you do have a platform that you've already built, of course, leverage that absolutely. But that's not something that you have to be able to get into this field, because media companies, there's so much more to it than just the social media aspect. But because we're in such a social media heavy world, especially in the pandemic, we spend more time on our phones, even more so than we did before the pandemic. I think it can be easy to get kind of like tunnel vision and think I have to already have, built a platform to show. And that's definitely not true.
Thanks. That's really helpful. And then I think I want to turn it over and give you the opportunity to maybe just share anything else that I didn't even know to ask. But before I do, the one thing I have really appreciated hearing you talk about that I talk a lot to students about is informational interviewing. And you kind of mentioned, just needing to put yourself out there, and you've talked about doing that. Do you have specific advice for using LinkedIn? And, a lot of times students' questions are, well, what do I say
Mhm.
to just even make that request? And so, what have you said? How have you done that? And then, specifically, it sounds like you did use LinkedIn. Any tips on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first is it's normal to be nervous. I know, especially when you're reaching out to someone that you're looking up to, it can be nerve wracking. The first thing, always start out being very gracious and grateful, and appreciative of their time. I also would recommend keeping it pretty short and sweet. You can kind of tell them, I'm a student here. This is what I'm majoring in. Um, I see this as your line of work. I'm really curious and interested to learn more about it. Would you have 10 minutes to hop on a call? That shows them also that you're not expecting to take up too much of their time, because, people are busy. And then, I always recommend following up. Um, that just shows you're eager. If you follow up a few times and you don't hear back, then I would say to leave it. But don't feel like you're annoying. A lot of people are just busy and they don't realize that they maybe didn't see the message come through, or maybe they didn't realize they hadn't replied. Um, so don't take it as if you don't hear right away that means that you bothered them or anything like that. Um, and then I would also recommend, like I said, just coming prepared. So do your research on that person and make sure that you have your questions prepared so that you're utilizing their time the best that they can. Another thing I would recommend is at the end, ask them, like, is there anything I can do for you? Because that shows them, and I learned this from a Calibet, because that communicates that you care about their work and really wanting to invest back in them. Um, Another key don't is don't ask for a job. Never do that. Really go about it from a genuine perspective of, I want to learn about your field and the work you do and what your day-to-day life looks like, to see if maybe this is something I want to pursue down the line. Um, and so if you come with that genuine question, they will feel that and sense that, and people are a lot more apt to want to help if they think you're coming from a genuine place. Um, and then, yeah, just connect with them, because they were all people, and we've all been students that are graduating. So just remind yourself that even if they are in this really, impressive position, they weren't always there, and they're still a human too, and you can connect on that.
Thanks. That's really helpful. Um, yeah, I guess just, part of what I love about this conversation today is we've covered so much. I mean, everything from your major in media to marketing to independent contracting, but also so much of what you said is applicable to everyone. So I really appreciate that. Is there anything else, that you advice you have, things you've learned over this past year experience that you can share before we wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I'm glad this has been helpful. Like I said, I vividly remember last year at this time myself, and being nervous and scared. And then when the pandemic hit, that obviously heightened. And so I can relate to all of the students very much. And so I would say the biggest thing is, because we are still in a pandemic and we really don't know when things will return or how that will look. Um, just show yourself a lot of grace in this process of applying to jobs. It can be really, really discouraging when you get rejection letters, especially if you're like, I put so much work into this resume and the cover letter and application, and I thought I was a good fit and I had this connection there. Um, it's hard. It's hard to get those rejection letters, especially when you've worked so hard at Cal and you have these expectations. Um, so the first is just show yourself a lot of grace and a lot of love and understanding, because we are in uncharted territory. And even though we're a year into it, we're still adjusting. and a lot is happening in our world. So the first I would say is just as you go through this process, if you have moments of being discouraged, absolutely normal. And just take that time for yourself and really give yourself self love. And then, start back again tomorrow. I've known people during the pandemic that got laid off and, they started applying to jobs that they were, very similar to the jobs they were doing prior to the pandemic. And it was still a process and it still took time and there was still a lot of rejection letters. Um, so I just say that not to scare anyone, but I do say it just to remind yourself that it is normal and all of us that have had to kind of go through this process during this time have had to endure that too. So just keep going. You definitely have this. And there's so many people along the way that want to support and encourage you. And so use Career Center, use the career counselors, and use Berkeley alum because, like I said, people really do want to see others succeed um, during this time. So you have that support.
Well, that is great advice and a much needed pep talk that I'm sure a lot of people need to hear right now. So I really appreciate your time and your insight. And I know you had mentioned to me before that you're on LinkedIn. So if anyone watching this is interested, to look for you there and reach out to you, but also other alum that way. So thanks a lot, Randy. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, take care.